This morning, I was removed from a Telegram group. It was the Telegram group of somebody called Nicholas R. Gilvey. I don't know who the fuck he is, but he calls himself writer, dreamer, asshole. He has an American accent, but is some kind of East European. And his post was, I see a lot of MAGA N-word in the plural, trying to back into the hedgerow, pretending like they were always against the orange pedophile. Do not let them, Trump supporters. Do not let them. Trump supporters might as well have raped the kids themselves. So I said, we should give even our worst enemies the benefit of a fair trial. And he deleted that comment, and I posted a further comment, which he also deleted. So now we know what kind of what's a word? What's a word that would be suitable? Grifter? Asshole. He described himself quite well. That's what he is. Nicholas R. Gilvey. The news of those hysterical accusations against Trump came out late last night. I'm happy to let you know where I first. I didn't know anything about it, but I thought, okay, we're YouTubers. We need to make content. We're gonna obviously comment on, the Minnesota shootings, the latest allegations of whatever that is scandalous, shocking. And of course, anything to do with Epstein. I'm just going back there to see my comments are still there. He's this YouTuber goes by the name of his name is Michael Lofton. His YouTube channel is called Cross-Examined with Michael Lofton. And he's also got one called Reason and Theology. So he does comment on theological matters, which is why he came to my attention. But I don't quite see why he has these different. I guess that there's one with all the late current affairs, and another that is basically theology, and his theological takes is, can you believe what the Catholic Church is now approving of? Something like that. Michael Voris used to do that. So I don't mind promoting him, and I will put the link to his YouTube video so you can go and check out that I have indeed posted what I posted about fair trials before convictions, etc. Hold on a minute. Oh, silly me. I should have shared this link before I started, but it's not too late now. I am saying, no matter what somebody is accused of, you should only find them guilty after they have had a fair trial. Because otherwise, you are living in a society that treats as true any accusation made. Do you want to live in a society like this? I wouldn't. And if I see any signs of it slipping into that kind of society where the moment you are accused, you are considered guilty. And um, and you know how children play, right? Um, you're a this. No, no, I'm not. You are. I win because I called you it first. So are we going to that kind of society? Because people have basically lost their minds? It would appear so. And how very, very sad that everyone wants to believe the worst of their ruling classes. I'm saying that there's no need to even look for extra dirt on them. What they're doing now is enough, and that's already in the public domain. I have said elsewhere that if it were up to me, I would declare a curfew in Minnesota to stop more silly people getting themselves shot over nothing. And I would also declare an amnesty on anyone accused of anything in the Epstein files, because here's here's the reason why it's never really going to happen for those who think, who are circling like vultures. Now, if you think of the just ordinary rape, right? Ordinary rape, you have to prove that A, sexual consent took place, and that it was not consensual. How are you going to prove that? Well, traditionally, it would be, well, you would have DNA evidence, distress, torn clothes, signs of a struggle, people hearing your screams for help, that kind of thing. And in the olden days, if a woman were to complain about rape afterwards, then he's going to say to her, I'm very sorry, but what you say won't stand up in court because it is one person's word against another, and the justice system will not blacken another person's name with evidence that cannot stand up to scrutiny, meaning that if it's just one person's word against another, then they're not going to entertain it. They might if, you have further evidence, like, people, witnesses to the victim, the complainant. You see, with the words, you have to be so careful. Somebody could be claiming a victim to be a victim, but actually, there is no victim until the crime is proven. Otherwise, she's just a complainant. And many years ago, this terminology was gradually kind of pushed out of usage. So every complainant is a victim, and therefore it means that there was a crime, and the accused must be guilty. Do you see how dangerous it is? Probably not, because most people are so moronic these days. They'll just be saying words, schmerds. Who cares about words and schmerds? And the people who most don't care about words are the ones who will just use any word to hurl against their enemy without care for the meaning of them or the truth of them. Because it's so easy, isn't it? It's so easy to make up a false accusation and make the most of the fetid polarization of politics these days. Most people are basically neurotic or moronic or malicious. Take your pick. Doesn't matter what they are. In terms of the consequences of what they do, I don't think so. So I'm just saying that it would be a good idea to, even if it's your worst enemy and you actually want to, hang, draw, and quarter him and shoot him on sight, you should still say only after a fair trial should he be hung, drawn, and quartered and strung up from the nearest lamppost, etc. Because if not, you might well become the victim of this kind of arbitrary vengeance seeking. The pity of it is that there are all these legal safeguards in place. It's just that you can't trust anybody to enforce it. So way back in, was it 2017, after Trump was trying to get his Supreme Court appointee through, Judge Kavanaugh was accused of something he was supposed to have done 20 years ago. They did find a witness. The point is, even if he did do all those things, you sort of know that you're only choosing to believe the victim because you hate the accused. You wouldn't like it if somebody accused you of some sexual offense 20 years ago, and this person probably wouldn't recognize you. So there should be a limitation on these accusations. You either really cared so much you called the police immediately and went to the police without, getting showered, because you need all the DNA evidence all over you if you're going to make the charge stick, or just not bother and, put it down to experience and, be more careful next time. One or the other. But I've noticed in recent years, there would be, he sexually harassed me. Oh, he raped me, but I don't want to call the cops. So what do you want to do? You just want to blacken his name slightly, but not call vengeance on his behaviour. And I'm thinking of the Socialist Workers' Party, where I think you should be able to find reports of it. And I can remember that the women said, one of the more charismatic male leaders of the Socialist Workers' Party was he treating them, the women of the party, like they were his harem or something? And I think it came out that they didn't really want him to go to jail, but they kind of wanted to punish him a little bit. And this is what I think is useful in remembering the traditional rules of evidence on rape. So once upon a time, if a woman were to accuse a man of rape, she would be vulnerable to having her sexual history exposed, like, how many men have you had sex with? Are you perhaps a prostitute? Have you had sex with this man before? And if she said yes, um, I think the charge would be immediately dismissed. Because she wouldn't be a credible witness, because she could say, um, if she had sex with him before and was now accusing him of rape, then it meant that they had a terrible breakup and she's really angry with him and now she's accusing him of rape to have, you know, her revenge on him. And then there was also a time when there was no such thing as marital rape. So wives complaining about uh, their husbands, I suppose this is probably what unreasonable behaviour that there used to be when divorce was still fault based. The idea that there was some um, what's a word I can't even remember now, um, grounds for divorce. So adultery is a ground, desertion, but you have to prove that um, you haven't seen each other for, I think it's 7 years, and then there's this wide category of unreasonable behaviour, and I suppose it's just easy to say, you know, that your husband is a pervert, and gain the court sympathy, and he wouldn't be able to say, "I didn't do it. She's lying," um, and quite often women would make up um, accusations of child sexual abuse. And I did once know a lawyer who said that this was her suspicion of her own clients. So there's obviously something wrong with the loop rules here. But back to Judge Kavanaugh, I remember way back then saying that there's actually a verse in Deuteronomy, I forget, 1915, I think, 1915, and it says, "It is not enough to convict a man on the testimony of one witness. 2 or 3 are required." So way back then, in the time of Moses, there was this idea that the uncorroborated testimony of just one witness ain't enough to make any conviction stick. And now we totally changed those rules to that of having to prove that you're not that you couldn't have committed the crime because you have an alibi, or you have the sense to save all the texts she sent you thanking you for a wonderful night as evidence that she was happy with your performance and wasn't complaining about rape at the time. And now it seems women have the option of appearing to consent to sex and later withdrawing it after realizing that the man that she had had sex with was not as wealthy as she had been led to believe. So we can go back to the issue of the credibility of the witness. So let's say a prostitute was complaining about rape. Then a question would arise as to, well, did he really rape her? Was she struggling? Or was she just complaining about him having sex and not paying her? And then it would be, well, I suppose then he should be charged with theft, or another crime of not paying for services given when there is some contract to do so. So as I was saying earlier, um, the issue of consent is one that is fought over by lawyers because if your client has been accused of rape, he does have a defense. He could say, well, I thought she was consenting because she was saying, fancy a good time, big boy, or whatever it is they say, or come up and see me sometime. And I don't know, when are you going to kiss me? Are you gay? I don't know, but obviously he must have reasonable grounds to believe that she was consenting, and that would get him, um, that would be a complete defense. That he reasonably, not just, he just ignored her cries and struggling and everything. He must have reasonably believed that she was consenting to have sex. So there we are. I know in the Epstein cases, the children, the statutory rape, so it doesn't even matter that they could have given consent, but it wouldn't matter because if you're underage, the consent that you give is not valid consent, and the person who had sex with you will still be charged for statutory rape if he reasonably believed, if he knew she was underage and not actually, um if he knew she was underage, um and continued nevertheless. So the very hysterical and lurid accusations against Trump are, well, I mean, they were just so over the top that you think it's just somebody making it up after seeing a few movies or reading, these accounts. You just think of the worst thing and then you make it up. Uh, and obviously, it is almost impossible to prove these things, without a witness. So we'll see what Trump and his supporters do. I mean, I'm just saying the accusers haven't got a leg to stand on. Where are they going to find the witnesses? And uh, and their testimony will not be considered credible, will they? It was a long time ago. How can it be? Unless there was this big fat orgy, and there were people there who said, "Yes, I saw so and so," and because I was there, at this orgy, and I saw all those things that that the complainant is complaining about, and I'm prepared to swear to it. I mean, unless you find somebody like that, how is that going to work? And of course, DNA evidence would be, well, I just don't see how they're ever going to bring a case in a way that would convince anybody. So that's why I think there should be an amnesty, because really there are so many more things that we should be talking about, like US foreign policy and all the things that ordinary Americans are complaining about. I suppose all this crazy stuff is being used by the Trumpophobes because they think, we have to do it now. We have to go all out and push back on him before America becomes a fascist state and he installs himself as king of America and begins his dynasty. and this is my um, perception of how these Trumpophobes think. And I don't think they're even particularly bright. They keep saying, "Oh, but all the children in cages, and this and that." It's like, okay, but ICE have a job to do, don't they? I mean, you can hate ICE because you hate Trump, but Trump was elected because there is a problem with illegal immigration, and he said he'd do something about it, didn't he? Unless the Democrats basically want to do away with the whole concept of illegal immigrant. Well, to be fair to them, they've already said we're not going to call them illegal immigrants anymore. We're going to call them undocumented migrants, which means that we're going to give them documents pretty damn quickly, and then they can become Democrat voting US citizens. I think that was their plan. So I am not ashamed of being one of the few people who say that whatever horrible, disgusting things Trump and others have been accused of, it is extremely unlikely that they will be brought before a court of law, because a good defense lawyer will easily be able to discredit the evidence and the witnesses, bearing in mind the circumstances of this very lurid scandal. Hello, Stan. Rite of the Lord. Rite of birthnight was a Christian legal night in medieval Europe, allowing feudal lords to have sex with a female on her wedding night. Yes, I've heard of that. I don't know why you're quoting this verse. Silver Mubasir. Exactly, Stan. I mean, I've said before in other streams that there's plenty of fascist insignia and symbolism in American public architecture. The Lincoln Memorial, that statue of Washington. Is that bundle of sticks? What's the problem with a bundle of sticks? National unity. It means that religion is the string that goes round the rope that goes round that bundle of sticks. That is the individual members of the nation who would otherwise be easily broken up one by one. So, fascism is basically a desire for national unity, hence the symbol of the fasces, right? It's just occurred to me that legally there's probably a lot people accused of unspeakable things on Epstein Island could do. I think they have the law against defamation, don't they? In the United States? Yeah, I think they do. They do. Because we know that eventually Johnny Depp got justice. He didn't get justice in British courts, but he got justice in American courts. British justice is a joke. I mean, these days, if you were to bring a legal action in defamation, you don't even get a jury. You don't even get, the defense doesn't even get a jury. And so it's very easy to nobble the judge and say an emoji a funny face emoji means that you libel the person that you were referring to. And this was what happened to Sally Berko. It was just outrageous. And even wealthy people, of course, they're not going to, it costs an arm and a leg to, to pay for lawyers. And, probably they just don't want to do it again, to be, told they're lost and be refused the right of appeal. Even Mr. Moneybags might think twice if he knows that the legal system is rigged. I mean, the latest thing I saw about Jeffrey Epstein is he was chasing some underage girl around in his kitchen. And you think, oh, how terrible, And it was just a game, right? They were just running around and you could hear her laughing. I mean, of course, we can assume that he raped her, but, if she's not around to complain, and why would she complain now that he's dead? So I actually think the whole Epstein thing is dead in the water. You probably could even release all of it and then say, it's deep fake, right? You'd have to say, who took that video? Who took that clip? And then I suppose you'd have to show, when that video was taken and who by, and I don't think it's that hard to take it apart. And simply, it's outrageous that anyone in public life can just say, oh, you committed some sexual offense 20 years ago, and the court has to the police have to appear to believe you, and then the court has to appear to take the accusation seriously, and in the meantime your reputation is completely ruined by your haters, who are obviously falling over themselves to believe that you are guilty as charged without even the benefit of a fair trial. Perhaps Westerners in their degeneracy will go back to the days when it was trial by torture, trial by ordeal. That was the term for it. So you'd be accused of something, and then you'd be taken away to be tortured. And if you really, 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 really didn't do it, you wouldn't break under torture. But if you broke under torture, then it means you did do it after all, after they, pulled out all your fingernails and toenails and hung you upside down for 2 days, I think, or whatever they would do, which wouldn't be very pleasant. We're going to go back to that again. So here I am, very proud indeed to say that anyone accused of anything mentioned in the Epstein files should be given an amnesty. And then we can concentrate on domestic and foreign policy. Why are you talking about the Merchant of Venice? Venice was a republic, wasn't it? I mean, if you've been there, you'd know, about the Bridge of Sighs and the Doge of Venice. It was a republic. Venice in the time of the Merchant of Venice. So we can check out whether it was meant to be a king or 16th century. Well, thank you for mentioning it anyway. So it's an independent city-state. Who was in charge of Venice in the 16th century? Was Venice a republic in the 16th century? Right, it was a republic for a while. It was a maritime republic throughout the 16th century. It was a patrician republic whose power rested with wealthy and noble families. The Doge was a figurehead, with the Council of Ten, and the Senate had held effective power. It was probably this form of government that kept Venice so wealthy. The Council of Ten, so there was consultation. It wasn't just some stupid tyrant signing people's death warrants without a trial. Anyway, you're wrong, Stan. There was no king in Venice during the time of the Merchant of Venice. And the Merchant of Venice is about, anti-Semitism. Why do Christians hate Jews so much? I'd say it's envy, and of course, people who envy another person will never admit to it. They would rather tell lies and have all kinds of scandals and accusations and say, I just hate him because he's got all the things I want but don't have. I suppose I'll stop now and think of a more clickbaity title. I know nobody cares about a fair trial before conviction. They just want to be not the odd one standing out and saying, "Oh, perhaps we should discuss how any of this stuff could be proven in a court of law." They won't be discussing that. They'll probably be fighting over each other, saying, "Oh, you support a paedophile president, and I don't." But the thing is, that you see that they've already the accusations were there already. What Pizzagate, right? So that was the Trump supporters accusing the Democrats of being pedophile, pizza eaters, and then and now we have this. I mean, because I guess the worst thing is having sex with children without their consent, um, and then eating them up afterwards, right? To destroy the evidence, because it's like, okay, that's the most luridly disgusting thing you can have. Sex with children, and then after that we'll just eat them to destroy the evidence. So clever, so simple. Yes. Well, prove it. I'm very well, Nathaniel. Come on in if you want. I'll keep the space open for a bit. The three branches of government are broken up and badly complicated dissolution of monarchy. No, 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 no. Well, even a monarch, if you know about the history of the Hasmoneans, I don't think the Jews know about the history of the Hasmoneans, because there's even a school, a Jewish school in London called the Hasmonean School. And I was thinking, but the Hasmonean dynasty, it crashed and burned, because their biggest thing was that the priest and king were the same person. And even, way back then they were saying, no, the king and the priest cannot be the same person. And they went ahead anyway. So there was no separation of power, and that meant you can't. That meant you cannot be properly advised by anybody. So, oh yes, this reminds me of what the Archbishop of Canterbury was meant to be. He was meant to be the king's conscience. I think it's one of the history plays of Shakespeare, maybe Henry II. So the idea was the Archbishop of Canterbury was meant to, be the king's second in command or advisor at least, but he would be answerable to the Pope in Rome, and for this reason he was resented, because it's like a governor general from the Vatican come to tell your king what to do. So this idea of being run by foreigners, it existed a long time ago. It didn't just happen because the brown people arrived. British were always complaining about being run by foreigners. They're being invaded by the Romans, Roman conquest and Norman conquest, and even the Anglo-Saxons themselves. They were also invaders, but they would complain about the Normans, who were originally Vikings, who Christianized themselves and then settled in Normandy. Why separation of powers important? It's because, it's like you can't play chess with yourself. I mean, yes, I remember I did try, of course, it's always more entertaining when you play with somebody else, but sometimes you're on your own and you're a child and you try to play checkers and drafts and games like that, and you think it would be more fun if I pretended to play against somebody else instead of not playing at all. And then eventually you get confused, and then eventually you just favor black over white. You just favor the one that appears to be winning, and then you make it win, right? So really, we need someone, an independent person, separate from us, to give us advice, and they should not be afraid of us, because if they were afraid of us, they wouldn't be giving us honest advice about anything. But once upon a time, the Archbishop of Canterbury would be answerable to the Pope, and probably the king, thought, well, if I trust in this Archbishop of Canterbury, he'll be reporting me to the Pope of what I intend to do, and the Pope may not agree, and he might, punish me with interdicts and all kinds of annoying things. And then eventually the British monarch decided to become his own his own Pope, which is what Henry did. He decided to become the supreme governor of not the Bank the Church of England. And so, while there was still an Archbishop of Canterbury, the Archbishop of Canterbury would be answerable to the British monarch, and the British monarch would, being an absolute monarch, would have the ability to, the right to sign people's death warrants and throw them into prison without giving a proper reason and take their stuff. And Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, all this stuff was really, the aristocracy complaining and eventually getting some rights against their king. The hand of the king is the most important, is the most powerful appointed position in the Seven Kingdoms of Game of Thrones, serving as the monarch's chief advisor, voice, and proxy, feudalism, satrapy. Oh, thanks for coming by, Nathaniel. I'll talk to you later. The Holy Roman Empire's governance structure was imperial diet. Is it diet or diet? Based on the Moorish Empire of Al-Andalus model of imperial divan. Well, it was Voltaire who said that the Holy Roman Empire was neither Holy Roman nor an empire. I'm going to ask AI what he meant by that. Oh, it's a bit slow. I'm asking Copilot this time. Why did Voltaire say that the Holy Roman Empire was neither Holy Roman nor an empire? Voltaire's famous jab at the Holy Roman Empire wasn't just a clever insult. It was a razor-sharp diagnosis of an institution that, by its time, had drifted far from the ideals its name claimed to embody. His line works because each term, Holy Roman Empire, had become, in his view, a hollow label. Why holy? By the 18th century, the empire was no longer a unified Catholic polity. The Reformation had fractured its religious landscape, leaving Catholics, Lutherans, and Calvinists under the same imperial umbrella. The emperor no longer served as the Pope's temporal arm, a role increasingly overshadowed by the monarchs of France and Spain. Why Roman? The empire's origins were Frankish, not Roman. It claims to be Roman His claims to Roman continuity rested on medieval ideology rather than actual descent from the ancient Roman state. The political and cultural center of gravity was in German speaking Central Europe, and not Rome. Why an empire? It lacked the centralized authority characteristic of true empires. Instead, it was a loose confederation of hundreds of semi autonomous principalities, bishoprics, free cities, and duchies. The emperor's power was heavily constrained by local rulers and by the complex constitutional machinery of the Reich. The spirit of Voltaire's critique. Voltaire's quip wasn't just historical commentary, it was a philosophical move. He loved exposing the gap between names and realities, and the Holy Roman Empire was a perfect target. An institution clinging to grandiose titles that no longer match its political or spiritual substance. Okay, so I wanted to find out about why Spain and France were becoming. See, how did they put it? Why did France and Spain increasingly overshadow the Holy Roman Empire? France and Spain didn't eclipse the Holy Roman Empire by accident. They did it because they built the kinds of states the empire couldn't: centralized, wealthy, militarily coherent, and ideologically confident. The empire, by contrast, remained a brilliant but unwieldy medieval relic trying to survive in an age of gunpowder, bureaucracy, and absolutism. Here's the anatomy of that shift. 1. Centralization versus fragmentation. France and Spain built strong centralized monarchies. Kings could tax directly, raise standing armies, and impose uniform law. Royal authority expanded at the expense of nobles. You see, I told you the ruling classes can occasionally fight each other. Holy Roman Empire, a patchwork of hundreds of states, duchies, bishoprics, free cities, knightly territories. The emperor depended on the goodwill of electors and princes. No unified taxation, no unified army, no unified foreign policy. A king of France could act. An emperor had to negotiate. 2. Geopolitical advantages. France, compact, agriculturally rich territory. Clear natural borders, eventually, Pyrenees, Alps, Atlantic, a single political centre, Paris, Spain. After 1492, a unified Iberian powerhouse, access to the Atlantic and Mediterranean, a global empire with American silver. Holy Roman Empire, hemmed in by powerful neighbours, no natural borders, constant internal disputes that foreign powers could exploit. There we go, we need national unity. And I don't care if it is represented by the fasces. The empire was a chessboard. France and Spain were players. 3. Economic power. Spain, American bullion, transformed it into the richest monarchy of the 16th century. Could finance massive armies and fleets. Yes, the English would know about that. France, Europe's largest population, strong agricultural base, increasingly sophisticated fiscal administration. Holy Roman Empire. Wealth existed, but it was dispersed. No imperial treasury. Princes guarded their revenues jealously. Economic centralization, geopolitical leverage. Yeah, it's kind of like, federal supremacy or states' rights. The American dilemma. 4. Military modernization. France and Spain developed professional standing armies, adopted gunpowder tactics early, built centralized command structures. Holy Roman Empire relied on contingents from princes, no unified military doctrine, internal conflicts. For example, the Schmalkaldic War drained resources. I don't know what that is. A modern state needs a modern army. The empire had medieval military federalism. 5. Religious unity versus religious fracture. Spain, fiercely Catholic, ideologically unified, used religion as a tool of state power. France. Despite the wars of religion, the monarchy ultimately reasserted control. Hence the massacre of the Huguenots, I guess. Holy Roman Empire. The Reformation shattered unity. Lutheran, Catholic, and Calvinist states coexisted uneasily. The emperor could not impose religious uniformity. The Peace of Westphalia, 1648, formalized the empire's political decentralization. I'm going to have to ask, how did the Peace of Westphalia formalize? Okay. 6. Dynastic strategy. Spain. The Habsburgs built a global empire through marriage and inheritance. Spain became the senior Habsburg branch, overshadowing the Austrian one. France. The Bourbons consolidated power and pursued aggressive expansion. Holy Roman Empire. The emperor was often Habsburg, but his imperial authority was weaker than his dynastic authority. Imperial institutions limited his freedom of action. The emperor was powerful as Archduke of Austria, not as emperor. 7. The empire's constitutional rigidity. The Holy Roman Empire was designed to prevent tyranny, not to protect power. Its institutions, Diet. Okay, how do you suppose to pronounce it? How to pronounce in German? Diet. Where was I? The emperor's constitutional rigidity. The Holy Roman Empire was designed to prevent tyranny, not to protect power. Its institutions, Diet, electors, imperial courts were brilliant but slow. France and Spain embraced absolutism. The empire embraced legalism. One produced Versailles, the other produced the Reichskammergericht. I don't know what that is, sorry. Maybe somebody will tell me. The big picture. France and Spain overshadowed the Holy Roman Empire because they became modern states, while the empire remained a medieval federation. Its pluralism made it culturally rich but geopolitically weak. Voltaire mocked it, but in truth it was a constitutional marvel, not just a competitive great power. Okay. If you want, we can explore how this imbalance shaped the 30 Years' War or how the empire's structure influenced later federal systems. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, please. Let's dive into how France and Spain's rise reshaped the fate of the Holy Roman Empire, especially through the crucible of the 30 Years' War and the long aftershocks that followed. This is one of the moments in history where you can almost hear the gears of Europe grinding into a new configuration. It's quite poetic, isn't it, this co-pilot AI thing? The 30 Years' War, the empire meets a modern state. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, wasn't just a religious conflict, it was the moment when centralized monarchies, France and Spain, collided with a decentralized medieval federation of the Holy Roman Empire. The war exposed the empire's structural weaknesses with brutal clarity. France turns the empire's weaknesses into strategy. France didn't just fight the empire, it weaponized its fragmentation. It funded Protestant princes inside the empire to weaken the Habsburg emperor. It intervened directly once the Habsburgs seemed close to consolidating power. It used diplomacy to pry apart alliances among German states. France understood something essential. You don't need to defeat the empire, you just need to keep it divided. This became a long-term French strategy for centuries. Spain's overextension and the Habsburg dilemma. Spain was a senior Habsburg branch, and its global commitments were enormous. Wars in the Netherlands, defense of American colonies, Mediterranean conflicts with the Ottomans, rivalry with France. Spain poured money and troops into supporting the Austrian Habsburgs, but the empire's internal divisions meant the Spanish resources were being poured into a sieve. The result: Spain weakened itself trying to prop up an empire that couldn't centralize. 3. The Peace of Westphalia, the empire's constitutional freeze. Westphalia 1648 is the moment the empire's fate is sealed. It did three things: legalized the empire's fragmentation, princes gained full control over their foreign policy, the right to make alliances, near sovereign status. The emperor became more of a ceremonial figure than a ruler. B. Entered the idea of a unified imperial religion. Catholic, Lutheran, and Calvinist states were all recognized. You see, Christianity is a poison chalice. You see, if Europeans had already been Muslim, there would have been no need at all to fight a European wars of religion. Would there? C. Elevated France as a guarantor of the new order. France became the external power that could intervene whenever the empire threatened to cohere. In other words, Westphalia turned the empire into a legal federation and France into its supervisor. 4. Long-term consequences. A Europe rebalanced. France emerges as the continental hegemon. Louis XIV capitalizes on the empire's weakness. French armies push into the Rhineland separate repeatedly. French culture, diplomacy, and absolutism became the European model. Spain declines. The cost of global empire and endless wars drains its treasury. This is something for you to watch out for, Americans. The Spanish Habsburg line dies out in 1700. The wars of the Spanish succession further elevates France and Austria, but not the empire. The Holy Roman Empire stagnates. It remains politically brilliant, but geopolitically irrelevant. Its internal diversity becomes a barrier to coordinated action. Prussia rises within it, eventually becoming the force that destroys it. The big picture, why this shift matters. France and Spain overshadowed the Holy Roman Empire because they embraced the logic of the modern state: centralized authority, fiscal coherence, standing armies, and ideological unity. The empire, by contrast, preserved the logic of the medieval order: distributed sovereignty, negotiated authority, and legal pluralism. The 30 Years' War didn't create this difference, it revealed it, and Westphalia locked it in place. Right. I wanted to ask, why did the Catholics win the wars of the Reformation in France? Oh no, I spelled France wrong. Okay. The Catholics won the wars of religion in France not because they were always stronger on the battlefield, but because the political logic of the French monarchy ultimately aligned with Catholicism, while the Huguenots, French Protestants, never secured the demographic, geographic, or institutional base needed to overturn that logic. The result was not a total Catholic triumph. Henry IV's edict of Okay, no, I'm going to know how to pronounce a word properly before I say it to you. Nantes. Nantes. Where were we? Henry IV's Edict of Nantes gave Protestants unprecedented rights, but the Catholic monarchy survived, and that was the decisive outcome. Let's break down the forces that made the victory almost inevitable. Demographics. Wait, where? The Huguenots were always a minority. At their peak, Huguenots were 8 to 10% of the population. They were concentrated in certain regions: Languedoc, Poitou, parts of Normandy. Catholics dominated the countryside, the clergy, and the urban poor. A minority can win battles. It cannot easily win a civil war for national control. Hearts and minds, hearts and minds. The crown needed religious unity to preserve royal authority. France was a kingdom built on the idea of one king, one faith. The monarchy feared that religious pluralism would fracture the realm. Even when kings were sympathetic to moderation, Charles IX, Henry III, they believed a divided religion is a divided kingdom. A divided kingdom is a weak monarchy. So the monarchy's instinct was always to defend Catholicism as the glue of the state. 3. The Catholic Church was a powerful political machine. The French Church was enormously wealthy, deeply embedded in local governance, a major landowner, a source of patronage for nobles and royal officials. The Huguenots had no equivalent institutional backbone because they were the new kid in town. 4. The ultra Catholic faction, the Guys, had foreign support. Oh, yes, mustn't be the Guise family. Leaders of the Catholic hardliners enjoyed Spanish support, papal subsidies, a network of militant confraternities. This gave the Catholic side money, arms, international legitimacy. The Huguenots had some foreign allies, England, German princes, but never at the same scale. The Huguenots were militarily strong but politically divided. They had brilliant commanders, Coligny, Conde, Henry of Navarre, maybe? But they were split between moderates and radicals, divided by regional interests, often at odds with their own nobles. They could win battles, but they struggled to convert victories into political control. 6. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre broke their momentum. The 1572 massacre decapitated Huguenot leadership, terrorized Protestant communities, strengthened Catholic militancy. It didn't end the wars, but it shattered the possibility of a quick Protestant ascendancy. Yeah, it was a kind of, I can't say genocide because they're all the same race, but you know what I mean. Henry IV's conversion ended the war on Catholic terms. Henry of Navarre, leader of the Huguenots, became king in 1589. To secure the throne, he converted to Catholicism in 1593. His famous line captures the political reality. Paris is well worth a mass. This was the turning point. The Huguenot leader became a Catholic king. Catholic legitimacy was restored. The war ended without a Protestant takeover. Henry IV then issued the Edict of Nantes, 1598, granting Protestants rights but preserving Catholic primacy. 8. The state, not the church, was a real winner. The monarchy emerged stronger because it ended the Guise challenge, it tamed the Huguenots, it reasserted royal authority over religion. Catholicism won because the monarchy needed it. The monarchy won because it absorbed and neutralized both extremes. The big picture. The Catholic won the wars of religion in France because the French state was structurally Catholic, and the Huguenots never had the numbers, institutions, or political leverage to overturn that structure. The wars ended not with a Protestant defeat on the battlefield, but with a Protestant king choosing Catholicism to unify the realm. Oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Have you all gone? Will I look at the stream? Yes, only one person. As I predicted, nobody cares. Well, I can read Stan's comment. Yes, the Third Reich is a reference to the Holy Roman Empire. The World Wars was about fighting over the spoils of the Holy Roman Empire after Napoleon defeated them, hence why World War One began with royal cousins' claims of emperor. I think it was well, I'm going to use World War One and World War Two as the perfect explanation of why race cannot be your religion. And if you white nationalists are thinking that Christian nationalism is going to save you, we'll just have to mention World War One and World War Two again, won't we? Since World War One and World War Two were wars of imperial rivalry. It was two attempts. World War One and World War Two were two attempts by the Anglo-Saxons to stop the Saxons from becoming too powerful in Europe. So that was what it was all about. So I don't see any need to refer to the Holy Roman Empire, because after German unification in 1870, it was so I'm saying that the British had an issue with the Berlin to Baghdad railway that the Germans were building. They felt threatened by it because obviously the railway would bypass the control of the sea lanes that the British had, and they wanted to stop Germany before it became even more powerful with the because of the Berlin to Baghdad railway. So I wouldn't say it's anything to do with the Holy Roman Empire. Stan says World War One was a familial conflict between three royal first cousins. Yes. George, William, and Nick Colours. Yes, I know Diet means Parliament. Yes, I mean the English like saying things like my ancestors came over with the Normans or the Huguenots or the Vikings, the Romans. Okay, so history lesson over. Thank you all for coming. But this started with me insisting that we must, even to our worst enemies, we must insist on a fair trial for even our worst enemies. Thank you for coming by.